Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of our series of talks on So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur. It's good to see those that were with us yesterday back again today, and some new names that we're seeing. We hope you're going to enjoy today's session. Um, Today we also have two guests, and we'll get to hear about them a little later. We've got Joseph Bunga, who's joined us, and we also have Ryan Ketai, who's going to join us a little later on. And the topic today is ideation that we're going to be focused on. So Dennis is going to have a session that is going to facilitate for all of us. I'm just going to mute everybody so that we don't have background noise. Okay. And if you could please all turn off your cameras unless you're talking, it'll make it a lot more efficient for us. If you have any questions, either raise your hand or you can just write in the chat box. We'll be monitoring those, so we'll be able to pick up any questions that you might have. Okay. Dennis, are you there? Yes, Dennis is there.
I'm here.
All right. We had some burning questions from yesterday. I'm just wondering, should we start with those? I also had a couple of questions I wanted to ask people today. Maybe let me start with my questions, if that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Is that okay? Cool. All right. So I've posted two questions there, and if you could please just answer them for us. And excuse the spelling errors on the second one. So first question, what is innovation to you? And second one, have you ever used a business model canvas before? So if you just quickly respond to those for us, let me launch the poll so that everybody can see it. I hope you can all see it now. So if you could please just respond to those two questions that I've posted. Okay, 14 of us have completed. We'll just wait for everyone to complete. We're almost there. Just maybe 10 more seconds, and then we'll see the results. Okay, let me end this poll and maybe share the results so we can all see the responses that we have. What is innovation to you? So for 25% of us, we thought it was a great idea. No one thought it was a new technology. No one thought it was a new product. A new line had no responses. 6% of us thought it was none of the above. And the majority of us, 70 or 69%, said all of the above. So Dennis, I know you're aspiring to be a lecturer one day. So please, can you mark our students for us and let us know how well they did in this test? At least question one.
So I'm laughing as I look at this because I don't want to mark everybody because we're here to learn and we're here to learn something new. So that's one of the things that we're going to discuss today. And again, we're going to be debunking a few myths about how we think around the whole concept of.
Fantastic. I wish I had a lecturer like you at university. You're too kind. Okay, number two, have you ever used the business model canvas? And again, the majority said no. Yeah, if I was to answer this, I'd also say no, actually. I've actually never used it. So I'm also looking forward to learning from what Dennis is going to take us through today. Right, so thank you for that. I think this result just helps us to get an idea of the people that are here and the sort of exposure that we have and the knowledge that we have. Mr. Dennis, I want to hand over to you so you can take us through. I think we had some burning questions we mentioned from yesterday. Maybe you can start with those and then go on to the presentations, if that's okay.
That's fine. I turned on my camera just to show people that I am really here. It's not a robot talking. I'm going to turn off my camera and start to share my screen. And then we can get going. All right. So today we're going to talk about designing your business model. And that's the very reason why we ask questions around innovation and also whether people have been exposed to or have used or experimented with the business model canvas. Just to do a sound check, am I loud and clear to everyone?
Yes, I can hear you well. I'm hoping everyone else can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So today is day 2 on our journey. Today we're talking about designing your business model, and we'll follow that on with about our value proposition and how we test our business ideas and also how we commercialize and scale up our business. Before we get into that, last night there were some burning questions that came up. There were quite a few, but what I did is paraphrase some of them. Some of them were comments that I turned into questions, but I just thought it would be nice to kind of address them. Some of them will be addressed in a lot more detail in the following sessions, but I thought some of them we couldn't park for too long in case people thought we're not listening to what they have to say. The greatest skill of an entrepreneur, if I might say, is the ability to listen to your market and accordingly. So if there's any one lesson that you will learn about being an entrepreneur, is to keep your ear to the ground and always, I call it a stethoscope. Always have a stethoscope to your market so you can pick up where the pain points are so that you can give a painkiller. So let's start with a question that came from Leon. I hope he's on today so we can address his question. And this way to fund a startup business is through customers. But what are the other ways that are out there in our market to be able to fund our businesses? And I think he's talking particularly in the Zimbabwean context. And the best method of funding anywhere in the world is what they call OPM, which is other people's money. So it could be investors, it could be your customers. It's 3 F's that people talk about in entrepreneurship, which is friends, family, and fools. And I think with Kudzai last night when he was talking about his first trip to Malawi, his brother had to go and borrow money from a friend to be able to fund him on his first trip out to Malawi. So there are different ways that you can fund a business, but when we talk about funding, there's two different types of funding. So there's funding to test your concept, and then there's funding to your business. And entrepreneurs always make the mistake that they must come up with this brilliant plan and go to a fund and get funding to solve. It never quite works out that way. So one of the ways, Leon, that you could look at is what's called bootstrapping. And bootstrapping is a method of basically, in Zimbabwean speak, they call it kia kia, where you basically use whatever resources that are at your disposal to test your concept. Because once you've tested your concept and proven that it can work, the funding will come. I have had a couple startups where actually started the business and used other people's money to scale the business because I proved the concept works. So I hope that answers your question. I hope you stick around for the next session where we talk about testing your business idea. Then let's turn to how do I turn my hustle into a striving business. Well, I mean, if your side hustle making money right now, my take would be your side hustle is already scalable. So you need to actually start working on the business to try and grow it. So look for funding. Because you've proven your concept, you should start going out there to start talking to potential funders to try and see if you can start getting seed capital in your business. And then the other thing also is that if your side hustle is now occupying a lot of your time, it's time to leave the job. How serious are you about your actual opportunity? So just some food for thought there for Mercy. And then Rosina says, how do I turn my ideas into a business? Well, that's the very reason why we're here on this course. And I hope that, as you go through this series of workshops and you get to interact with the entrepreneurs that we have as guests, you'll start seeing how you can turn those ideas into a business. But the thing I harp on about all the time is you need to get out of the building and test your idea. Because your idea is an idea until you get somebody who actually is willing to pay money for it. Then it becomes a business. And then Divya was asking how she can be more entrepreneurial in a corporate environment. And corporate entrepreneurship is a very interesting space because you're actually in an environment where generally all the resources that you need to be entrepreneurial are available. But you run the risk of organizational politics because there's a tendency of business executives to want to exploit their current business model as opposed to exploring new business models. So you actually have to learn to be very ambidextrous in how you navigate that space. And I would strongly recommend that you pick up this book by a guy called Tendai Viki, which is called Pirates in the Navy. It will give you a lot of insights into how you can come up with different hacks to be able to navigate that space. And then Liz asked the question about how to balance the desire of it, with social impact. That's always a difficult one. But the critical thing is for you to balance your business model. And you'll see as we discuss further how you manage what we call the front stage and the backstage of your business model. And you'll get a bit more insight into how you do that. Tarero also talked about her side hustle and how she can use her skills to better the business she works for and also build a side hustle on the side. And what you do with your side hustle is build it and continue to build it until it needs your full attention. And so if you're able to even start employing people into your side hustle, you're setting yourself up for success because you're also developing the skills in those people who are going to help you drive your vision. So I would say keep building the side hustle. It's always great for you not to burden your business, your personal expenses, in terms of salary and upkeep and stuff like that. how my passion into a profitable business. And I often have huge debates with other entrepreneurs about the word passion. Passion for me is not the right word because it's very emotive. When you do things out of passion, I mean, you hear people talk about crimes of passion. It tends to seem to have an element of irrationality to it. But I know what you mean because it's something that you strongly believe in. So I would turn the word interest. And if it is your interest, what you need to do is to be able to turn that interest into a business that people actually can support. And again, if you stick around to our whole testing of your business concept and your business idea section, which is the next section, you get insights into how to do that. But you know, the word passion sometimes can lead you down a path where you're creating stuff that somebody else may not see as being of value, but you value it. So let's use interest rather as the word to replace the word passion. So please, guys, keep the questions coming through. We may not answer them in the session, but as you can see, we'll pay attention to them after the session and answer them in the following session. So today, we're going to look at business models and business model development and innovation. And the key resources here are business model generation. Alex Osterwalder and his partner Yves Pino came up with the business model canvas, which we're going to discuss in detail. And then,
hi Dennis, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you a bit. Can you try share your screen again because we're not seeing it?
Okay. Shall we try again? Are we together?
Okay, yes, we're seeing it now.
Okay, perfect. So anyway, everybody's questions were up on one slide. So I hope I've addressed those questions. And I encourage us to keep putting questions through on the chat that we can always attend to during the day, so that in the next session, we can answer those questions. So in terms of key resources, I was talking about, business model generation. These guys are the guys who came up with the business model canvas, which we are going to use as a tool to interrogate and develop our business model. And then there's also a book called The Business Model Navigator by Oliver Gassman, where he and his team identified 55 different types of business models that entrepreneurs can actually tap into, tweak and change, and be able to come up with their own unique business model. But I think right from the get-go, based on the question that we asked in the poll, we asked the question, what is innovation? So innovation is anything which is new, but the caveat is it has to be of value to the world, right? So innovation is invention. So when we talk about invention, that's when we say it's a great technology, it's a great idea, it's a great concept for a service. But what you need to realize is that an idea or an invention in of itself is worthless to the world unless you can commercialize it. And this relationship, I normally put it in the form of an equation where I say innovation is equal to invention times commercialization. It's actually a multiplier effect. It's not an either or. So you will not get innovation if you have a great invention, but you can't take it to market. Because if commercialization is zero, then innovation is zero, because the invention times zero is nothing. And at the same time, you may have a great way to bring a product to market, but if you actually don't have a product that the market wants, then you've got an equation that says innovation is equal to zero times commercialization, which is equal to zero. So you cannot have innovation when you don't have both an invention or an idea or a great concept which is coupled to a sustainable and commercializable business model. So the thing that drives innovation, like I said in the last slide, is commercialization, because that is now the key to unlocking the value from your invention, your product, your service, your patent, whatever brilliant thing that you've come up with. And I like to use the example of Apple. I think after last night's session, people know that I'm a bit of an Apple phobe, but they are one of the most fantastic entrepreneurial businesses in the world, because they've been able to build their business literally from a garage to being the most valuable company in the world by simply innovating their business model. So let's start with the Apple journey, where they started. So Apple started a platform called iTunes. And the problem that they were trying to solve, if you remember, we talked about entrepreneurs being people who solve problems, is that if you go back, say 10, 15 years, if you're old enough or even longer, you often had to buy a music album. And when you bought the album would have 12, sometimes 15 songs on it. And you would find after exploring the album that you only liked 3 songs. So what Apple did is they took MP3 technology, which they didn't even invent themselves. MP technology had been developed by a German company. And they then went to the record labels and said, if we were able to offer you people the ability to buy a song for 99 cents on our platform, would that be viable? And then what they then did is, after forming iTunes, they developed the iPod. And the iPod was basically taking the MP3 player and coupling it with iTunes. And then their breakthrough innovation was the iPhone, where all they did is they took the iPod, they added iTunes to it, and they took a cell phone and an internet browser, and that became iPhone. And iPhone completely revolutionized the smartphone industry. So commercialization is actually more important than the idea that you have, because you could borrow somebody else's technology, but if you couple it to a business model which is unique, you're on your way to success. So what is a business model? Because this word has been used and abused in a lot of contexts. It's simply a way to describe how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value for itself and its stakeholders. And regardless of whatever type of idea you have, it doesn't matter how cool it is. The critical question is, can it deliver value to the customer in a sustainably profitable way? So a business model, in a successful one, is made up of a delighted customer and sustainable profitability. And as I mentioned earlier, the tool that I prefer to use when we talk about developing a business model is the business model canvas. And today's session is going to be a little bit short, because I'm going to encourage people to actually practice this on their own in terms of how they develop their current business model, or how they start ideating around how they can create a viable business model. So the canvas basically has 9 building blocks. And these building blocks help us to crystallize and define, first of all, who is our customer? What customer segments are we actually servicing? The second question, which is the value proposition, is what value do we actually sell to them? What makes them buy from us as opposed to somebody else? The third question, and when we look at channels, is how do we deliver value to them? Do we deliver value to them through an online platform? Do we do it through intermediaries such as supermarkets or service station or distributors? And how do we actually interact with these clients in terms of the customer relationship? Is it an interpersonal? Is it a business to customer relationship? Is it a business to business relationship? Is it an impersonal online relationship where we actually don't physically speak and interact with the customer? How do we actually earn money from these customers? What's our pricing structure? Is it a subscription model, or do people pay outright for our product, or do they pay for the usage of the product? The other side we need to talk about is, what are our key activities? What must we be great at doing ourselves? Or if we go to the key partners, what are the kind of things that we need to outsource? Who are our suppliers? Who is important in our value chain, such that if that person or that organization was not there, we would be out of business? And then we also look at key resources. What are the key things that we as a business must own? So for example, Ryan's going to be talking to us later on. One of his key resources is his platform. He needs to own that platform for Farmer Hut, for buyers and sellers of agricultural produce to be able to interact on his site. And then also importantly is the cost structure. What is the cost structure of our entire business model? And the business model can actually be divided into two sections. The front stage, which is what people actually see. People see your product, your value proposition. They experience your channels. They also experience your relationships, and they pay for the service that you give. And then the backstage is the stuff that people actually don't really see. This is what happens either in your factory, or if you're outsourcing, it's your import market where you get your stuff from. And that's the backstage. And that's the side of the business that actually costs you money. And the whole idea is that when you craft your business model, the backstage should always be equal to or less than the front stage. And therefore, you have the ability to make money. And when you take the business model and you play around with it, you can actually put monetary figures to each section and add up the front stage and the backstage to actually test to say, is this model actually going to make money? And this is the most difficult part of entrepreneurship, because this is the thing that people actually don't spend time and effort actually thinking about. But this is the part of entrepreneurship that can actually make or break your business, because the canvas actually tells you whether your business model is viable or not. And you can play around with the different aspects, reduce costs in one, eliminate one, change things around. And so I encourage you to download the business model canvas from strategizer.com and actually play around with your own business idea or your current business and see where you can get leverage. And I think it's important for us to also talk about business model failures and why business models sometimes fail. The first failure is usually when you're trying to solve an irrelevant customer job. And we're going to be talking about value proposition design. And value proposition design is actually an extract from the business model canvas where we match your value proposition and your customer segment. In other words, are you hitting the mark in terms of solving your customers' pains by providing them with the right product? The second problem that you face with your business model sometimes is that the business model is flawed. In other words, your backstage costs you more than your front stage. But that's not to say that the business model will fail. As you start interrogating the different aspects of your business model, you can actually see where you can reduce costs and where you can increase your revenues. So the question is, do you have the right business model? The third potential cause for failure is external threats. And these external threats can come in the form of somebody with a better business model than yours. So this is what happened to the metered taxi industry when Uber came in. Uber came in to fulfill exactly the same consumer need, but has a much better business model and a much better value proposition. The other thing that will threaten your business is technology. So you may come up with a great concept to do stuff in retail, and you're overtaken by events as what has happened with COVID, and people decide, no, we're not going to come into your store because we don't want to get infected. We're going to buy stuff online, and you're not geared to be able to provide your service or your products on an online platform. And then the third threat is actually resistance from customers, where you may have come up with a brilliant product, but maybe you're not doing things in an ethical way. So those are some of the things you need to ideate around to say, what are the external threats that possibly might affect my business model? And the last one is obviously issues around economic factors. So context really matters. You may have a great idea for a business, but for example, if you're sitting in a depressed economy like Zimbabwe, where maybe it's not the right time for you to actually be, successfully launch this product supported by this type of business model. So you also need to think about your external threats. And then the last one, which is the most common, is poor execution. In other words, do you have the right skills and resources to execute your business model? Here you need to think about, do I actually have the right team? Do I have the right facilities to be able to produce a product with the right quality? And can I do it consistently? Because the business model really is about sustainability. And let's quickly go through some monumental global business failures. I'm sure everybody has come across these brands. So Kodak, as a business, went into little oblivion because they actually failed to recognize digital photography as a disruptive technology. And the strangest thing was that Kodak was actually the first company in the world to develop digital technology. But they were making so much money from selling film that they thought, you know what, we'll get to this later. And before they knew it, Canon, Nikon, and other companies developed digital technology and overtook them. And Kodak is a shadow of its former self today. Blockbuster, if anybody cares to remember, these were guys who were doing videotapes and DVDs through physical stores. And they didn't realize that there was this thing called the internet and streaming that was knocking on their doorstep, and they chose to ignore it because they were so big and they were so strong, they thought they would be in business forever. Coincidentally, Reed Hastings, who is the entrepreneur behind Netflix, actually came to Blockbuster to offer Blockbuster's his business when it was still a startup, and they looked at it and they said, this thing will never work. And we all know what Netflix is today. Don't even remember who Blockbuster is. Toys R Us, household brand, failed to recognize the opportunity to go online. And because they were carrying other people's products, when each of those companies decided to start going online and shifting to Amazon, Toys R Us were left with these huge shops with toys that nobody wanted to buy.
Hi, Dennis. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you a bit. Your volume is just decreased. I'm not sure what happened, so we can't hear you too well.
Can you hear me clearly now?
If you could increase it a little bit more. I'm not sure what went. You were really clear, and then it just went a bit low.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
It's better, not as good as it was initially. Maybe people can also just let me know in the chat box if you are hearing him clearly.
Okay, I'll try and talk a bit louder. I didn't make any adjustments on my side. So Nokia also didn't grasp the concept of apps that were being developed in the smartphone industry. And as we know today, they focused on hardware. The Nokia 5110 was bulletproof, but guess what? The Nokia 5110, you can't send email on it, so it's not important to the world anymore. BlackBerry were the same thing. BBM was a closed community, which a lot of us snobs, subscribe to. If you didn't have a BBM, you were nobody. But before you knew it, Apple came along, Samsung came along, Android as a platform was developed, and BlackBerry doesn't exist today. So you need to constantly check your business model to make sure that it's still relevant to your target consumers. I mentioned earlier that research has identified 55 different business model patterns. And these business model patterns have been there from biblical times. Nothing has actually changed, but you're able to actually tap into these 55 business models to develop your own type of business model. You can take different combinations, and I encourage people to look up the Business Model Navigator, because you have 55 different models that you can choose. What I did today in the interest of time was just select 2, just to give you an indication of how these patterns work. So the first one is what we call the razor and blade pattern. And this is where a basic product is offered at a bargain price, below cost, or even free. And then you have additional products that are used to make money for the entrepreneur at a later stage. So the strategy is to win a customer, and then by lowering the barrier to purchase, and then actually making money on complementary products. And the men around the room will know Gillette is notorious for this. When you buy a Gillette razor and you buy the handle in the razor for the first time, it's dirt cheap. And then you use it, but thereafter, when you now want to replace the razor, you pay through the nose. And unfortunately, you can't go and buy another cheap razor to use with that handle. You're stuck with Gillette until you decide otherwise. And one common one to everybody is HP with their inkjet technology. I mean, how cheap is an inkjet printer today? I mean, I know in the South African context, you can buy an inkjet printer for like 500 Rand. But have you ever looked at how much it actually costs to replace the cartridges? But once you've bought the printer, you need to buy the cartridges. And so HP is laughing all the way to the bank because they've got recurring revenue coming out of the sale of the cartridges. Nespresso has also done the same thing. Once you've bought the machine, you're stuck and you have to buy the pods. So that's an indication of one type of business model pattern. The other business model platform pattern, which is very common, and the most successful businesses today are actually using this platform. It's called a two-sided platform. Sometimes it's multi-sided. But what you do as an entrepreneur is you basically create a marketplace or a platform where 2 different groups of people, buyers and sellers, can interact for mutual benefit on this platform. And you make money off the transactions that take place. And this model uses network effects. So if you consider a company as valuable as Amazon, Amazon actually don't really own that many brands. But what they do is they've created a marketplace for buyers and sellers. So you can go and buy a book on Amazon, but Amazon didn't publish that book. They have gone into publishing, but most of the books you buy are actually from somebody else. But they've linked buyers and sellers. And this kind of business has really grown. If you look at Google, we as lay people use Google for free. But Google itself is a very valuable platform for advertisers because they've got millions and billions of people watching the Jerusalem dance and what have you, which becomes a captive market for them to be able to advertise on. MasterCard links vendors and financial institutions through the use of their cards. And then Ryan's business, which we will interact with today, Farm Hut, is also an online platform which links agricultural producers with buyers. So I encourage you to play around with your business model or your idea for a business model until you reach the sweet spot. And I'm going to end here because I'd really like people to download that tool on strategizer.com, print it out and start plotting your business model to actually see if your idea or your current business model is actually the best that it can be. So I'm going to end here, Kudzai, and leave some space for our guests to interact with the audience today. And hopefully I'll get a lot of questions coming through that I can answer before tomorrow's session. So I'm gonna sign off here. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dennis. And I think that there's lots for us to follow up on. There are two questions here that I'm just wondering if you could maybe one, let's look at one. How important is it to continuously innovate, stay relevant to your consumer base, given the ever-changing environment we live in?
That's probably the most important thing that you could ever need to do, because the market is constantly changing. Competitors are, I mean, if you've got a great product and a great business model, somebody's going to come out there and try and take your lunch. And they're going to be coming with different iterations of the same thing that you're doing. So you need to keep as close as possible as you can to your customer base. In fact, the most successful businesses today are business to consumer businesses, where a business is actually selling directly to the person who consumes the product, because you can get direct feedback from that customer in terms of what they like and what they don't like. So it is absolutely imperative for you to keep your ear to the ground. A lot of companies, like we mentioned, all these companies whose business models broke down, stopped listening to the market and stopped keeping a pulse on what was going on around them, and they were overtaken and eventually shut down. So it's critically important.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And I think Rudo wanted to hear more about more business models. Maybe we can share something for people to then read about more of them, since I think we now want to get on to the discussion with the guests.
Awesome. I'll get you to share all sorts of different types of business model patterns that people can actually play around with, try and combine different business models together to try and see if it's going to talk to their value proposition. So that's fine, Rudo. We'll share different types of patterns that you can actually play around with.
Okay. Rosina commits a sin that we all commit. She loves doing what she does, and she ends up just providing the service to people for free. Don't respond to that, Dennis. We'll tackle it later. I just found it very interesting. I think we're all guilty of that at some stage or another in our lives as well.
That's true.
All right. Please keep those comments coming in, and then we'll find a way to address them. So today we've got two guests, and I'm going to start with Ryan, because I think Dennis just touched on his business just now. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to put on the video so people can see you.
Yes. I hope they can hear me properly.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for coming through, Ryan. What I'd just like, before I start asking you a couple of questions, is maybe if you can just tell people about yourself and your business, so we all get an idea of what it is that you're into.
So like my mentors always say, start with the backstory. So the second born of four, orphaned back then 10 years ago, and I'm a fighter really. Grew up in a conservative family that probably informed my decision in life. So we started Farm Hut in 2017. Managed to put up all structures, formalize everything in 2019, and we generally offer a service that probably everyone has been taking for granted. That's how farmers get to sell their produce once they harvest. Because according to FAO, farmers lose over 40% of their produce due to post-harvest losses. And that has been attributed mostly to market challenges. So that's a space that we saw there was a problem, and we fixed a solution for them.
Okay, no, fantastic. And you didn't mention it, but you're still at school, aren't you?
Yes, I'm an engineering student at the National University of Science and Technology.
Okay, and your awards, let's hear a little bit about all these awards you've won and competitions you're entering and what you're up to winning.
So the Lord has been so faithful. We've managed to win around six awards. Really, the challenge has always been how are we going to raise the next dollar because like what Dennis had outlined earlier, bootstrapping, that's all we've been doing so far. And we've been getting into a number of challenges in trying to enrich our startup, especially when it comes to development, etc. So we managed to scoop the first prize for the Green Enterprise Challenge. That's, I would say, one of the biggest competitions here in Zimbabwe, which is held by every year. Then after that, we managed to get into the house prize, which is an 300 year. So from that, we are currently in a fight to win the $1 million prize, which we're going to London for, and then New York for the finals next year, January. Then after that, we also got into the University World Cup competition, which we going to be out in China this year. Then due to COVID, in December, and we also won one of my favorite competitions, the Founders Life, held by Impact Barare, which is a very informative competition. Then after that, we also won the Africa Cup, which is an annual cup held in Africa by South African Innovation Startup Summit each and every year.
Okay, that's great. That's really great. When I first read all that, I thought, is this for real or is Ryan just making up stories here? But it's fantastic to hear what you've been able to do. So, Ryan, I think one of the biggest challenges that people face when they want to start businesses is the issue of raising funds. And I think particularly we hear it from people starting out or people still at school wanting to do business. I have all these great ideas, but I don't have the money for it. So would you agree that was for you, or generally that is one of the biggest challenges that people face? Do you agree? If not, why don't you agree?
When you started off, kind of fixated on the issue that we need more money coming in. We need this money. We need this money. But then trying to look at it now, we couldn't account to each and every dollar that we needed. Right. So that's when we spouse, let's try to bootstrap each and every dollar that you need in. And you actually manage to see a time because we're looking at 50,000 watt, and it was in the count. And so I don't think it's because it is of value and it's solving a problem that's prevalent in a society, then the study is supposed to, at that early stage, prove itself. In the MVP, you can push the startup can push itself, either bootstrapping or paying customers. The challenge, I think, and I believe is always there, is that of putting the whole business mentality in place and know you have what you don't. You would have in trying to seek every meeting and account for it. We didn't even know what we wanted to do with it.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. In your entrepreneurial journey, what has been the hardest issue you've had to deal with so far?
So the hardest part of my entrepreneurial journey was the age. So you'd find we hold meetings with the Ministry of Agriculture because that's the direct ministry that you deal with, and you'd find that the moment and we flow with the panel that's there, the first question is going to be, aren't you in school? Aren't you supposed to be in school? Who is the most senior person? Can you have someone who is senior? And that's been a challenge, really, because the fact that most of these investors that you have in Zimbabwe, most of the partners them. The break that here for us in the early stages has been very watching them. And from then, that's how we solved it. But then the issue of age was always a problem
Okay, and maybe going forward, what are your plans for the future?
Next gen. So by 2024, it's made that we're supposed to be getting at least 2 million smallholder farmers here in Zimbabwe. We are in the process of securing South Africa and Zambia to expand. But then we wanted to have a solid foundation in Zimbabwe first before we get our product out there to other areas. But then we wanted to have the foundation cemented here. But then it's going to be expansion into the SADC region and into the rest of Africa.
Sorry, I'd cut in there with a question before you finished. Looking ahead, what are your plans for the future? And maybe you can then just join that with any message that you'd have for people taking part today, any words of encouragement you might have.
I believe that as the proof of concept, now we're in the process of Zimbabwe, entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, is that don't let your age limit you. Don't let the lack of funds, which is very, very popular. Your idea is to make you where you vision it. What you just need to do is to have the space.
Hi, Kudzai, are you still on?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. I think Ryan is done on question.
All right. So I think we can then get Joseph. If Joseph is there, we can then maybe start talking to Joseph. Are you in?
Yes.
Right. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, our time is rather limited, so we're just gonna go straight to Joseph and talk to him. I went to primary school with this young man, so you can just guess how young he is. So Joseph, just a bit about yourself. Just tell us. I know you can talk. Just maybe give you a minute or a minute and a half to tell us all about yourself and what you're into, so people can just get an idea of who we're talking to here.
I think you're right. I can talk, so you better put a timer somewhere. I'm passionate about Dennis's thing about passion and reality, quite interesting thing, and I think he's right. Quite often when I speak with incredible passion, a lot of the people that I end up speaking to say, "Whoa, dude, nah, this is going to." I use the phrase fellowship around food is one of my core ways that I choose what I work on.
Fantastic. So tell us, Dennis was talking about a business model. I don't know if you could relate. So maybe just to ask you, how important is your business model to the success and survival of your business?
So I think that if I had talked to Dennis about the business model early on in my life, I might have not had as many problems as I actually did. I think that I was going with passion and said, dude, let's make some money. And that was not so smart. Hey? So look, in short, I think the business model is really critical. I think that I've always been more, hey, let's get off the ground, let's get going and do stuff. And I think in more recent years, I'm far more organized. I think the business model canvas absolutely revolutionized my thinking. And the first time I came across that was on a Google Startup Weekend. And mind-blowing. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And I think now anybody who wants to kick off a business, it's one of the simplest tools to get off the ground with.
Okay, and maybe you can just pick one. I know you've had lots of business ideas that you've implemented, but as you develop your idea for business, what was your vision and how big a dream did you dream? Where did you see yourself getting to?
Okay, so I think one of my biggest vision was for a reality television show, which I wanted to become Battle of the Chefs Africa. And at the moment, it's coming into season 4. It's been sponsored by TM Pick and Pay before. The first year put me in absolute debt. And I think, from a business model perspective, the reason that it wasn't successful in Zim in the first year was that it was ahead of its time, as so to speak. If it was in another market, so for example, while the Zimbabwean businesses didn't understand why they should do product placement and things like that, MasterChef was already happening in South Africa. It was a huge success in Australia. It was a massive success in the UK. So I think one of the things when you're creating a business model, you should think about is the relevance of that business model in the environment that you're in. And quite a few things I've done where I've done it too far in advance. And I think that's something that you have to be really aware of, especially in the African continent context, is the market ready? Are the people that make decisions ready to understand that, hey, this is where the world is going? And I think there's been a huge amount of frustration, and I'm no doubt that Ryan is experiencing this right now, where he's saying, but guys, this works everywhere else in the world. What is your problem? I mean, what do you mean I'm too young? What do you mean this doesn't work, And I think that's a huge, huge problem in Africa, in the sense that, the people that are in positions of power, whether it be finance, corporate, are still Kodaks, if I can put it that way.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So, I mean, when someone listens to you, I can't imagine you failing in any business. But we know that 70%, I think, of all new businesses fail. Have
Yes.
you ever failed? And what lessons did you get from any failures you've had in your ventures?
You know what? I think I proclaim myself one of the king of failures. I've failed at many things, and I have no problem accepting failure. And in fact, I think I'm blessed with this thing of I don't feel hurt when I fail. I'm actually quite happy. I look at the results. I'm already working on the next iteration. I'm working on the next project. I enjoy. I've never seen failure as a big deal. And when I say never, I just want to be clear that maybe that's not fair. Not never. I think there've been times where I felt it was awful, and I think every entrepreneur goes through that. But in majority of the time, when I look at my average day, I'm failing several times in the day, but they're small failures. And I think this is something that I'd love to share with entrepreneurs. Go for the small failures. Don't try and fail big. This whole thing of go big or go home, I don't know. Hey, I really think that it's much nicer. Fail small, enjoy the process, understand, lick your wounds, move on.
Oh, fantastic. And maybe a last question before we round up. You mentioned the environment and context as well. So we get a lot of people in Zimbabwe saying, I can't make it because of the Zimbabwe environment. We've had the COVID pandemic and people saying, oh, if only there hadn't been COVID, I would have done this and that. How have those impacted on you and your businesses, the general environment, and then looking maybe at COVID specifically?
Absolutely. So, I think just prior to COVID landing on our shores, I happened to be in Durban, and this was in February, and the whole world was now zoning into COVID this, COVID that. And when I got back, I had a chat with my team and said, guys, this is going to hit. And at that time, we were having a relatively successful business, which we were catering for an airline. And of course, we all know what happened when COVID became a thing. All the airlines were grounded, and that just brought our business from like huge to zero. And I had a conversation with Kura Musasiwa from Fresh in a Box, and both of us said, dude, we need to do something. This is crazy. Businesses are shutting down. And it took us 7 days to draft a plan and launch Joey's Pizza. And this is something that I think from a topic point of view, guys, collaboration. My goodness, you know what? This thing of trying to sort out a business on your own, I cannot believe we're still thinking like that in this day and age. Get together with other smart people. Learn to work with other smart people. And for me, this particular example is probably the fastest time I've taken to take a business from concept to execution. and we bootstrapped it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's absolutely incredible how we've got clients all over the world sending pizza home. And, you know, this is leveraging Kuda's experience online, being able to reach out to people, and us leveraging my experience on creating processes. Every person that was on my team, not one person knew how to make pizza when we started. And within 7 days, we trained everyone up in small components of the business and said, right, you focus on this, you focus on this. And we had it up and running.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I like that. You know, a lot of people think if you're doing it alone, then maybe you end up doing it better, but there's so much more you can get from synergies and working together with people. But also, as Norma says, and Norma is going to join us tomorrow, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And a lot of times people spend time just lamenting and then crying about what is wrong and not looking for those opportunities. I mean, talk about meeting a need. When Joey's came on board, we were all so happy at that time to be able to order pizza again. Thanks, Joseph. We're going to end here because this is rather a short show. But I'll say to everybody, please connect with Joseph, connect with Ryan, with Dennis, with myself. I think most of us are on LinkedIn here. Let's just connect and network and see what it is that we can do together. So thanks a lot, Joseph. And thanks, Ryan, as well for joining.
If I can just say something.
Yes, please.
Connect with people, I think, on a business platform, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, fantastic. Just putting it out there.
Right. All right. Thank you, Joseph. Right, and I can see it's just after 7, so we're going to wind up for today. Thanks for all the great comments that have come on our chat box. We've also had people commenting on email and on the different social media platforms. So we'll take a look at that and then see how to incorporate it into our shows that are coming up. Tomorrow, we'll have Norma Halimana coming on board. She will talk to us about her journey from being in the corporate world where she was killing it to then deciding I'm going to leave this and then go and start my own something. And also Rumbi Vunzawabaya will join us. She was also a lawyer, had her own firm, decided to get rid of it and start working on social enterprises. It'll be, I think, really interesting to hear from the two ladies tomorrow what was going on in their heads when they made these decisions and how their journey has been so far after making those decisions. So we're looking forward to talking to them tomorrow. Dennis, any few words before we round up?
Yeah, just to thank everyone for joining us again. It's been really, really exciting. I've taken time to look through some of the comments, so please rest assured that we will try and answer all your questions when we begin the next session tomorrow. Joe and Ryan, awesome insights. You know, I often say to people, it's nice to speak to people who've been through the trenches, who are in the trenches, so you can share experiences and realize that it's not this big, hairy, scary monster that entrepreneurship is made out to be. It's an incredible journey, which can be extremely rewarding. So thanks to our guests, thanks to all the participants, and also thank you to my host with the most, Kudzai. Good night, everyone, from my side.
Right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.